Alrighty, so I wanted to talk a little bit about gear today. I've been doing some more guides recently for maybe newer players. So if you're new to the game or you're new to the channel or you just find any of the info helpful, feel free to subscribe because I do upload every single day. I don't know if you have any ideas for other guides or something that you're maybe confused about in the game or anything like that. Feel free to leave a comment. Maybe I can make a guide for it. So today I'm going to be looking at this set currently that I'm working on along with some other aspects of gear in general. Before we hop into that gear set, I do want to say that if you're looking to get specific pieces of gear, obviously there is the equipment, sort of areas that you can go and farm for specific pieces. Obviously, you're going to have to do it on the highest difficulty if you want to drop SSR pieces or whatever, but you can go and you can click on any of these. If you're wanting attack pieces, you can click on any of these, go to that stage, farm it, whatever you need to do to get a specific piece. Obviously, the rolls on it are kind of what's more or less important. At this point in the game, I've been playing the game ever since it came out. I don't really farm using this equipment stage thing at all anymore. I think my main source of gear is either coming from the patrol missions. You do actually get some halfway decent pieces from that sometimes. And then the gear gacha, which is... if you go to the equipment draw here, you can pay 200,000 gold per spin or per multi to pull for equipment, and I have it set up to where it'll automatically discard everything that's not SSR. And then as I acquire gear through just various means of either dailies or those patrols or whatever the case may be, just every once in a while, probably I would say like once a week or so, I go in, I look for the pieces that are halfway decent. So I've got a couple here that I have locked, and basically what I do is I just look at the base stat on it and I see whether or not it's about 90-ish% or more filled up on the bar. That lets me know, like, hey, this is a pretty good piece. There's not really any need to re-roll the main stat or anything, so that is going to be a piece that I'll end up upgrading eventually when I need it. I'll slap it on a character. So yeah, a lot of these pieces are already just kind of upgraded. You can see that the rolls on them are all over the place because unless I actually need the piece, I don't just waste anvils on just random pieces of gear that I don't know whether or not I'm going to use yet. Sometimes you get lucky and you end up rolling halfway decent stats on some of your rolls, which ends up saving you anvils in the long run. Like maybe this one. No, this one right here. It's got 3.7 attack. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like any of the attack rolls are like halfway decent except for this 2.3, but even then, actually the main stat roll on this one is actually a lot lower than I would normally go for. I think I'll actually end up scrapping that one. But yeah, if it gets a halfway decent roll on the attack and stuff like that, that's great. You can end up saving a couple anvils there. But when I don't need a piece, I will just, I haven't really been doing it a whole lot lately, but I'll try to +5 the piece. That way when I actually salvage it, I can get more materials out of it, hopefully. This used to be a big thing that I remember people doing during like salvaging events and stuff like that, but they really don't do salvaging events all that much anymore. So if you +5 something, you basically have just a better chance of getting some of the higher tier stones out of it. I didn't really get too much here. I got a decent amount of 4-star stones though, which isn't all that bad. But yeah, I'll just salvage any pieces that I don't actually need. That way it keeps my inventory clean and I can just worry about the ones that are actually halfway decent on the the base stat itself. So this is a gear set that I've already sort of went through the trouble of upgrading everything to at least like 5-star. You can see that the substat rolls on the attack, this one attack piece, and I think no, I haven't done any of these other pieces yet. So this is the only piece that I've actually rolled any on. Normally what I do when I'm like actually making gear, if I want it to be halfway decent, is I will go to the repeated change down here at the bottom, go over to attack, and then normally I put it on 2.5 and just let it re-roll a ton until the piece is actually halfway decent. If you really want to save on some anvils, you can go on like 2%, but at this point in the game I try to do 2.5 if possible. That might be cutting it a little high because I do end up wasting a decent amount of anvils, but it also takes hammers to be able to get these higher up, and hammers are a lot harder to come by than anvils as far as I'm concerned. So 2.5 is normally where I kind of stick to things. So for this piece, for example, I would go here, I'd go over to attack, put it on 2.5, and then I just let it sit here and re-roll until the piece is completely finished. Luckily we got one on the first roll there, which is kind of nice. But yeah, sometimes this can take quite a bit. That one was a really good roll. That's a 3% and a 2.8, and there's a 2.9, so this one's going by really quickly. Normally I don't get that great of luck when I do this, but you know, obviously the faster you can get some of these rolls, which obviously you don't have any say-so on that, it's just all pure RNG, the more anvils you'll save and that you can use on your other pieces of gear. But yeah, sometimes whenever it's just a one specific piece being re-rolled, it takes a while because it's, you know, it just takes a minute. But yeah, normally I'll just let this sit, do its thing, try to come back to it at some point. Right now I'm working on an HP defense set because honestly I think HP defense is probably the most used set out of the entire game as far as I'm concerned, because it's not only good to give you higher CC for characters, but you know, you can put HP defense sets on your link characters like association units as well, so that way you get higher CC when it comes to using them for like PvP or whatever the case may be. And if it's like a supportier style hero, you don't really need attack or anything like that to begin with. So I would say that the most popular sets in the game are currently either HP defense or attack crit damage at the moment. I don't think crit damage was really all that crazy like back in the day. Like whenever the game first came out, there weren't really anybody using crit damage pieces as far as I know, but as the game has sort of gotten older and, you know, substats and stuff like that have risen a lot because of, you know, just power creep in general, a lot of newer characters have higher stats. A lot of them have really high crit chance or crit damage or whatever the case may be, so you know, running crit damage on an attack set is a lot more beneficial for an aggressive character, whereas, you know, running an HP set with defense with a defense piece, you know, as the extra set will end up getting you a lot more CC, because those are both main stats that contribute to your CC a lot more. So most of the time support of your characters run stuff like this. Obviously there are characters that maybe fit the exception, one of them being Tarmiel, for example, because of Tarmiel's passive, where it decreases all enemies' maximum HP by the value of 200% of the hero's defense. That is really playing on his defense. So you know, for a character like this, I'm running full defense pieces. So you can see I have 3 defense set buffs here because it only takes 2 pieces of defense gear to make 1 buff. So running a full defense set for him is ideal. There are other characters as well that can be a little weird, like this Valenti, for example. I don't have UR gear for her, but the way that her passive works, as you can see, increases the hero's pierce rate and crit damage by half of the hero's crit resistance at the start of the battle. So having, you know, these extra crit resistance pieces on her helps out a little bit there. So I don't know, you kind of have to look at what character you're building a set for and, you know, determining whether or not it's actually worth, you know, making those weirder rolls, because obviously if I was to make that a UR gear set for that Valenti, not really any of the other Valentis would get use out of those crit, you know, resistance pieces. So it might be something that it's like a luxury almost. You could do it, but you're not going to be able to get, you know, as much use out of that for other Valentis. So in the beginning, I would say I would stick to as many like attack crit damage or attack defense or HP defense sets as you can, so that way you can actually use them across a broader, you know, range of characters. Like there's 10 melees in the game at the moment. I actually have 3 different Meliodas UR gear sets. One of them is an attack defense set. This was my original set that I made. All of the melees are pretty aggressive characters, so you can an attack set would normally be like the ideal one for him specifically. So I have an attack defense set. I ended up, because there's so many melees and some of them were actually getting a lot of use, and I use some of them for associations and stuff like that, I ended up making a second set at some point, and this one is an attack crit damage set. So this one is a little bit more aggressive than even the attack defense set, and I use this on the newest melee because I think it benefits him greatly. And then I even more recently, I think I actually just finished up the rest of the UR gear stuff for this set today, but I actually just made an HP defense set, and this is mainly only for the fact that I can put him as like an associated unit, because I have this melee 6/6. I also have this melee 6/6, so I can put the HP defense set on those characters and use them as the associated unit, so that way they get the most CC out of the character. So it just, you know, it takes a long time to build up gear sets in this game. It's one of the more tedious things about this game, but you know, once you have an SSR set and you completely, you know, max it out and then you +5 it, you can actually turn it into a UR gear set for a specific character. So yeah, I don't know, there's a lot that goes into gear, but hopefully this was a halfway decent like intro guide to gear, at least, you know, just showing you how at least I make gear sets and stuff like that. The only other thing that I can, you know, really mention is that I normally try to make sure that my middle 2 pieces are the other set pieces, because you can only put 4 HP set pieces onto a character, because it takes yeah, I think it says it somewhere around here. So this is a 2-piece set to get the defense buff, whereas the HP set is a 4 set to get the HP buff. So just make sure, if you can, it helps to organize your gear and try to go with the same thing every time, so that way you can kind of swap gear out for different stuff. Like, so if, for example, if I was going to make this set, and I wanted to eventually, like, say there was another melee that came out and I was like, oh, I want to make an attack defense set, I could keep these 2 defense set pieces, and I could make sure that my next pieces that I made were, you know, attack on the top and bottom, so that way I can still use the 2 middle pieces and swap out the HP sets for, you know, attack sets, if that makes any sense too. So that way you get a little bit more, you know, flexibility with being able to swap gear pieces out if you're not, you know, sitting on entire sets like I am at the moment. But yeah, there's just kind of getting used to the whole like system and making sure that you get the most, you know, efficiency out of it. It's kind of hard to do in the beginning, but you kind of get used to it as you go along. So that is pretty much all I have to talk about. I don't really, you know, this isn't like super in depth or like anything like that, but I just wanted to give sort of a small insight into how I kind of do my gear. That way you can kind of get an idea for it. If you have any questions, I'd feel free to answer them down below if you comment. But other than that, that's all I have to say. So thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully this was a little bit helpful. Feel free to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one.